Hey YouTube, this is Kurt for More, and today I'm going to go through a quick walkthrough of how to get started with GraphQL and Laravel. This is not an in-depth presentation on GraphQL itself, so if you're not familiar with it, I'll leave some links in the description so you can kind of get acquainted with GraphQL, like the type system, queries and mutations and things like that. Once you have a grasp of the basic concepts, then you can come back here and watch this video where we'll basically get started with quickly getting up and running with Laravel serving a GraphQL application. So what's GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language for your API. So what does that mean? It's kind of basically it's just an alternative to REST where it's just a different way to query data on your backend services. So I'm not going to go into what's better, REST or GraphQL. It's just based on your use case. Certain cases REST is going to be better. In other cases, GraphQL might serve you better. So for this video, we're going to use Laravel version 5.4. We're going to use a package called Lighthouse, which is a package I created. It's just a wrapper around GraphQL-php, which is a fantastic project in and of itself. But Lighthouse just helps you get rid of some of the boilerplate and get you up and running a little bit faster when creating a GraphQL server with Laravel. I'm just pretty much going to go through the walkthrough that I created. It's inside the documentation for Lighthouse, which is lacking. I have a newfound respect for open source maintainers. Hopefully I can come back through this and kind of button things up. But yeah, we're just going to get started almost from scratch. The only things that I've done so far up to this point was create a Laravel application. I installed required the Lighthouse package. I updated my configuration file to include the Laravel service provider from Lighthouse as well as the facade. And I published the Lighthouse configuration file itself. So we're going to get started with the migration. So I'm going to run through migrations here. We already have a users table. We're going to create a jobs table, task table, and a task user table. And let's populate these migrations. So we'll start with the jobs because users is done for us. So here we just have foreign key relationship on the user. So that's the user that created the job and the title of the job itself. And next we have the task table. So here we're going to tie it to the job. Completed by can be null, but that's going to hold the user ID for the user that completed the task and then the title of the task itself. So we can actually save these. All right, and then the last one is our task user table. So that's going to hold the reference or many-to-many relationship. Okay, so we have those. Next, let's create the models. So we'll start with the user model, which is already generated for us. And here, the only thing we need to do is add this trait, relay connection trait. And for those of you that are familiar with Relay, which is a client for GraphQL on the front end with use in conjunction with React, it has this concept of connections. It's kind of like a has many or belongs to many relationship, the equivalent for Laravel and Eloquent. So this trait basically is just kind of like a helper. It provides a to connection. It provides a method basically that takes in some arguments and spits out a relay compliant connection. So here, our user, we have two relationships. One is the jobs that the user created and the tasks that the user is assigned to. So next, we're going to create our job model. So I say PHP artisan make model job. All right, so now we should have job model. All right, and here we have the relationship. This is the user that created the model, and these are the tasks that are assigned to that job. Syntax error. All right. And finally, we have our task model. So let's check that. Okay, so now we have our 3 models. Let's create database or seed our database. So I'm going to go to the model factory. This is inside of database factories, model factory. For those of you that haven't used this before, it's just a really simple way to seed your database with dummy data. And then you need to update the seeder itself. So let's have a database, seeds, database seeder. Right, and so what are we doing? We are running this, we're going through this array, we're just basically calling these functions, and first we have the migrate, which basically is kind of like dumps everything and then regenerates the database. I think actually there's a new method to do this now. We're going to start with 10 users. We're going to create some jobs and assign tasks to each one of those jobs, and then each one of those jobs is going to have users attached to it. All right, so that takes care of the seeder. Let's actually run this. So it ran our migrations to create the tables, then it populated the users' jobs and tasks table. All right, so now we're on to GraphQL. So again, this is just kind of like a getting started. I'm not going to really delve too deep into what types are, what queries are, things like that. I might do a whole series where I would include things like middleware, so authentication, like dive a little bit deeper into like what connections are, how they work, how to paginate through those, solving N+1 issues that you probably run into. But again, for this is we're just gonna get up and running so you can actually see how we query the data in GraphQL with the data that we have in the DB. All right, so Lighthouse itself ships with a couple of commands. Really, they're just generators. So you can use it to generate connections, edges, fields, mutations, queries, schema, and the type, or types, I should say. And we're going to get started with the types themselves. So when you are creating a GraphQL server, you want to think through your schema before you just start like mapping, just generating types. You want to think through how the relationships work and things like that. And the way it works is that your API kind of exposes these types. These are the things that people can query when they hit your API. So for us, in this particular case, we have a task manager, right? And so what we want to expose are the users, the jobs, and the tasks. So we need to create a type for each one of those. So we'll get started here with the first one, which is going to be a user type. And you can see I'm setting a flag here at option relay. For those of you that are familiar with it, relay has some specifications that kind of go above what the GraphQL spec itself. Just as an example, relay requires a way to, like it says, like, okay, here's the ID of a particular node. It could be any type. I'm giving you an ID. I need the data for that back. So Lighthouse built in basically has some helper methods set up to make it relay compliant. And so what we're just saying here is that we want to create a type for the user, a job, and a task, and we want them to be relay compliant. All right, so that created some files inside of HTTP GraphQL types. Okay, so here's our user task and job. So just for the time being, I'm going to quickly copy and paste this, and we'll go through it. All right. So our user type has some attributes. It's got a name, right? It's a user. The description of it, it's an employee, acne, job, management, corporate, company. And so this is required by relay. It's got a result by ID, and basically what happens is it's going to pass you an ID. So it could be pass you just the number 1, right? And so what we're doing here is just saying, hey, Eloquent, I want you to go to the users table and find the user with the ID of whatever's passed to it. All right, and the last thing we need to do is define our fields that we want to query against for a type. So you can see here, like, your fields, it's up to you what you want to expose through your API. So we wouldn't likely do something like exposing a password, so we just wouldn't have a field for it. In this particular case, we're going to have a created at and an updated at, but if it's not relevant, then we don't have to include it as a field. We're in complete control over what we expose in the GraphQL API. So here we have a field called name, right? And GraphQL is a type language, so we're saying the type is a string. The description is it's the name of the employee, right? And then the next one we have is an email. It's got the same type. It's an email, or I'm sorry, it's a string. The description of it is email address of the employee. Okay, so let's go through the next two. We have the job type. So pretty similar, name, job, description, result by ID. That's a mistake. Find. All right, and the only thing we're exposing at this moment, at least, is the title. Right, so we got the title, and it's a string. The description is the title of the job. And actually, what I probably should be doing on most of these, if it's required in the database, I could say, okay, it's non-null, meaning like you will never get you won't get null returned back for this. It comes, the type has a title, or always will have a title. And last is the task type. So let's populate this one. All right, same thing, name, description, do that find in there, and again, the only thing that we're exposing is the title itself. All right, so now we have our types, and I mean, again, this is a pretty simple example. I just basically went one-to-one with my development models. I made a type for each one of these, and that's what we're going to expose again in the API. So in order to start to query for that data, we have to make a GraphQL query. We're going to call it a viewer query. I mean, this is really up to you. It's kind of like, one way to think about it is like the entry point into querying data. So you can have one or you can have multiple. Viewer is like when Relay first came out, the example, they always had the root that was called viewer. But you kind of think of that as like, okay, when you query data, you're authenticated, so you're a viewer of this data. But you can really call it anything. You could call it root. You could call it me. Or if you wanted to create a query that starts with a job, you would say like job. You'd call it a job query. Completely up to you. So we created a viewer query with the helper, the Lighthouse query helper, or command, I guess you should say. And let's populate this, and then I'll kind of talk through it. So we now have a queries folder. Here's our viewer query. All right, and so stepping through it, the first thing we have a type. So it's asking us, okay, what type in our type system are we going to return? We're going to return the user. We'll actually see this in the schema that I'll create in the next step. So we're going to create a user, or I'm sorry, we're going to return a user. For this query, we don't need any arguments, okay? But we have an option of saying like, okay, if you want to query for user, I need you to give me the ID, and it's kind of the same way as the fields. I can type, the type would be, could be int, or there's a type of ID. You could maybe use a UUID, so string. So here you can say like, okay, these are the arguments that are required to run this query. And last is how are we going to resolve this? So again, we're returning a user. So we're going to use our user model. And the built-in authentication for Laravel gives us that. So that's what we're going to return. So it's return the user that's currently logged in. So for you to kind of see how that would work, we're going to set up our schema, which is pretty much the last thing we need to do before we start actually querying data. So we have a query. We have 3 different types. The query needs to return a user. So now we just need to tell GraphQL like what this schema looks like. We have to tell it about, what types we have and what queries we have. So I'm going to create a new file inside of routes. Call it graphql.php. I copy and paste this. If you're familiar with routes in Laravel, it's fairly similar. What we're saying here is that, all right, GraphQL, I'm going to add, or I'm going to actually wrap this in a group and give it this namespace. So that way, I don't have to type out the entire namespace for all of these. I can also add middleware as part of Lighthouse. So do something like this if I wanted to. You'll see here, we're just going to mock out some middleware just to get us started. All right, so what we're doing here, we're saying we want to add a type to the schema. We're going to call it user, and it points to the user type. Same thing for a query. We're going to add a query. We're going to call it viewer, and it's going to point to our viewer query. All right, and let's see. Last thing, I need to go to the configuration. So when I published, we did the vendor publish. Let's see, config, Lighthouse. This was created for me. And place register with this. So it's basically saying, hey, when you go to register the schema, this is where you need to look for the schema file itself. All right, so I believe that should be it. Now we should be able to query our data. So I am running this on port 8001. Okay, so this is GraphQL. It's a pretty fantastic tool. I'll add a link to it again in the description. But Lighthouse sets up this endpoint for us, or this URL, I guess I should say, GraphQL. And this is, we're going to send through all of our queries. So we want to query, we called it viewer, right? So we want to start with a viewer. Now the viewer returns a user. And the fields available on that user was ID, email, and name. Right? So actually, if I run this, I think we're going to go back to null. Right? Why did that happen? Well, because what happened was we went to the query, or GraphQL went to this query and said, okay, let's resolve it. What do you have for me? Well, I got an unauthenticated user, so I have nothing at the moment. So it returns null. We kind of stop right there. So what we're going to do, just for the sake of this example, is we're going to create some middleware that's just going to log us in. Do not do this on production. Yeah, people really don't do this anymore. All right, so let's go to that middleware that we just created. Okay, so what it's doing is saying if we're not logged in and if this is not production, go ahead and just set the authenticated user as the first user in the database, and then continue on. So now we just need to register that. Right. So now if I go back, there we go. So that's going to be the first user in our database. And that's it. That's the data that we asked for, right? We asked for the ID, the email, and the name. So the great thing is, like, I can just ask for what I need. So if I have like a spa, right, and I just need to display the email and the name of the user, that's all I need to even ask for. I don't need to literally get everything for that user. But this isn't really all that great, right? It's just we're just getting one individual record. Where I at least feel like GraphQL is most beneficial is when we start like querying the relationships. So what I always felt was missing in my when I work on front end or work in like a mobile environment like iOS or Android. I always found, and this is me. This is my issue with not properly setting up either like my REST API or not having things just set up for me. But my issue is always trying to grab the data that I wanted. And usually that data is nested, right? So front-end applications, mobile applications, they're getting more complex, and it's not just literally like, I just need a list of users and that's it. Typically, it's like I need a list of users and something else. So then maybe like it's a post. And it's like, great, so I need a post, and I also need the author of that post. I just want the author's first and last name, and I also want the comment count on the post. And maybe if I have the screen real estate, I want the first comment for the post, and I want the author of that comment. Like, doing something like that is pretty complex, but this is what GraphQL is kind of built for, is that I can query all the relationships on my types, and the server handles it. Now, just saying that is one thing, and actually building it out is something different. You'll see, like, you'll run into different kinds of issues. This is not just unique to GraphQL. It's like, how would you handle that in Rust? You're probably going to run into some of the same issues. Like for one, your N+1. There's things that you're going to have to do to basically wrangle in those, how many times you hit the database and things like that. All right, but let's kind of carry on here. So we're going to add a connection. A connection, you can kind of think of it as a relationship, right? So our user is connected to jobs. Our users are also connected to tasks. That's a relationship that we built in Eloquent. So we're going to register those two other types, right? So we already made these. These are our tasks and our job type. So we're going to register that to the schema, and Lighthouse has a way to easily build out connections. So we have PHP Artist and Lighthouse connection. We're going to call this user jobs connection. I should have probably said this earlier. Each type needs a unique name. I could have said like jobs connection, but what if we had a company, and a company could have jobs and users can have jobs. So we probably want to keep it. It helps keep it unique. So I just said, this is just my way of naming it. You can name it whatever you want, but I called it user jobs connection. All right, so if I go back here, GraphQL, now I have a connections folder. Here's my user jobs connection. I can, name it whatever I need to. The type. So what are we returning? We're returning a job. Because it is a relay connection, there are arguments that are already created for us by Lighthouse. I think there's like a first, there's an after, there's a couple more. I'll go through it when we go through it and when we query the data. And the last thing is, how do we resolve this, right? So this connection is a child of the user. And maybe it would help if I actually did that. So I'm going to get back to this resolve function here in just a minute. Right, so that's funny. I don't even have a document. It's great. So in my user type, all right, so I have jobs. So that's a field under my user type. And by saying GraphQL connection, and we called it user jobs connection. And we want the field. And since I didn't set this up, I have my product complete. Okay, so we added a new field, right? This is going to be a relay connection. We'll see like how that's laid out in GraphQL here in just a minute. And we're just saying, okay, the connection, we're just going to pass it a new instance of the user jobs connection class, and we would convert it to a field. Now, here's what's going to happen. When we get to the user, and if we ask, let me refresh this, and say jobs. Right, so now you can see, okay, jobs is available to us now. Now I can start, oops, and I guess we'll edges, node, and jobs have got a title. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to start at the viewer. The viewer is going to return a user, right? It's going to be the authenticated user. And then it's going to go to the jobs field. And it's going to call this resolve function and pass it the user that it's basically, it's kind of like the parent, right? It's sitting above. And so it's going to pass us the user. In this case, it's the authenticated user. It's going to pass us the arguments. So if we set up additional arguments here, that would be in this array, along with the context and the resolve info, which we won't get into in this video. All right, so I have the parent, really, it's my user, right? And because Eloquent is fantastic, I can say, okay, I want the jobs. And this get connection is provided to us by this trait. Okay, it really all it is just adding a scope. So I can call get connection. I give it the arguments, and it's going to give me really what it does is it gives me a length of a paginator, and it's going to turn a list of jobs. All right, so now we have the user, we have the email, their name. Now we have the jobs. This is kind of relay specific edges and nodes. We'll build another one that's just like the regular Laravel paginator, but this is the way that relay connections are built out. All right, so each node that's a job, right? So each job has a title. So if I needed to have an ID, so I could go to the page in my spa application or something like that, so I can include the ID and I can add that to my link, right? All right, so and just kind of exploring this a little bit. We also have page info, which is pretty handy when we do pagination. So I can say has next page is a field. This is provided by Lighthouse. It's not required by Relay, but I can ask like what the total is. So this kind of helps me paginate through. So it's telling me I have a total of 3 jobs, or this user has a total of 3 jobs. And because we have all 3, there's no next page. That's false. Right? We're on the last page basically already. All right, so that's one relationship. We went one level deep. All right, so I'm going to now add a new connection. This is going to be jobs tasks connection, right? Because each job has multiple tasks. So let's create that. I'm using a cheat sheet here. So here's the new connection. Copy and paste. Pretty much the same thing, right? We got the name. We don't need to change it. What's it resolving? It's resolving tasks. So that's what we named it in the schema, right? Our schema file. We call it task. So task is what we're returning. We don't need any additional arguments, and we're doing pretty much the same thing. We're saying, okay, so our parent here is now going to be the job, right? So we're in this node. This node is a job. So the parent is going to be the job from the field above. So we can do the same thing because we have a relationship on our jobs model. I can just say, okay, job, I need your tasks and run this scope, this query scope, and here's the arguments that was passed in for that field. All right, so let me save this, refresh. All right, so now we should have, we need to add it. So update job, tasks inside job type. Okay, tasks. Pretty much set up the same way. I'm going to do this. Use HTTP. Right. Yes, there we go. All right, so again, this is for pagination. So what if I only want like the first 2? And
I'm just showing like a little snippet. All right, so I can just say, just give me the first 2 tasks. I don't care about the rest of them right now. I can, if I'm in a mobile device and I got that infinite scroll view, right? So I scroll all the way down to the bottom, and then I can say, okay, after the first 2, now I need the next 2. I'll show you how to do that. So with the edges, node, again, this is relay specific. And now this node is a task. So what do we have on tasks? It's pretty much the same thing. We got titles. We got title. We also have an ID. There we go. So this is where it's kind of becoming eye-opening for me. I already have my tasks. Eloquent kind of like sets up my relationships for me, and I didn't have to like create a brand new endpoint. I just kind of had to say, hey, there's a field available on a job called task that is my task relationship, and that's it. That's all I had to do. It's pretty simple for me now to grab or get these related types, and there wasn't a whole lot of work. There is definitely work up front, but afterwards it becomes you can iterate a little, or at least I can. I can iterate a little bit quickly, or a little bit more quickly through this. All right, so last thing, our tasks have users that are assigned to it, right? So I'm actually not going to go off this. I'm going to show a couple different ways I can resolve this field, just so we can look at it differently. And I'll update the docs too, because this isn't too fun. They're all connections. They're all exactly the same. All right, so, sorry, actually we've got jobs. Nope, tasks. All right, so I'm going to say users. All right, so I'm not going to use a helper. I'm just going to create a new field. I'm going to call it users. All right, and so what type is this? Well, it's a type list of, and it's GraphQL type user. Okay, so what are we saying here? We're saying users, the type it resolves to is a list or an array of the user type. So, because I'm not having Lighthouse do this for me, excuse me, I need to resolve this manually. So we are going to get a task, and we get the arguments. Okay, so again, since this is Eloquent, I can just say return task users. That's it. So this resolve function gets called every single time we get to that point of the query. Right? So when we get to task and I'm going to add users here, it's going to say, okay, for each task, fire this resolve function. And it's going to give me the task. It's going to give me any arguments that were provided. And I resolve it myself by saying, okay, just return user task. Now, I'll kind of pause here too. This resolve function can resolve anything. I'm showing Eloquent models, but that right there could be a call to some third-party API, right? So if I had a GitHub user type, right, and I need to resolve and go get that data, what I could do is just make a call to a third-party API and say, hey, GitHub, I need a user for this ID. So yeah, this resolve function can be anything. I'm just showing, using Eloquent, but yeah, it can be used for anything, and that's, it can be pretty powerful as well. It's one way people, migrate some of their API, or if not, possibly all of it, to from their REST API. Instead of rebuilding it from scratch, you can say, well, let's leverage what we already have, right? We already have a way to grab users, and I already have a way to paginate through it. So instead of rebuilding all that work from scratch, I can just instead send a request. Maybe it's like an internal request or something like that, and hit that same REST API point, get my users, and then pump it through here. All right, so let's see what this looks like. So this should just be array of users. Fantastic. And I expose what email. Actually, just so you can see, if I do some option space, list. So I'll also resolve it. Yay, there we go. All right, so here is our viewer with our email and name. There's the jobs, right? Here's the individual job, the title. Here's the list of tasks for that job. And then here's the list of users that are assigned to that one particular task. All right, so you can start to see, like, now we're another level deep on this. And there wasn't a whole lot of work that we had to put in to get here. We already had our type set up. And then you see you can go as deep as you want to, so now I can go back and do jobs again. There is a way to kind of limit how far down nesting you go. All right, so yeah, let's play with this just a little bit. That's great that we have an array, but what if 1,000 users can be attached to a task that's not going to be very performant? So we want to paginate through this, and if you think that's what relay connections are for, they're so you can kind of paginate through your data. But let's say that we don't want to do it that way. We want to paginate. We want to do it the built-in way, but the way that Laravel has to go. So I'm going to say PHP artisan Lighthouse type, and we'll call this for task users. And actually, I'm going to put this in the so paginate task users. All right. So what we're saying here is users is of a certain type, right? It's a list of users. Well, we don't have to do this. What we could do instead, if we want to add some additional fields, I can actually assign it to a different type. So task users, users assigned to the task. And what are the fields? So Laravel has great paginator built in. It's a link below. Pagination. And we have these methods built into it, right? So we have count and let's see, total per page, has more pages. These are things that we can use to kind of help us paginate through the data on our client. So let's use some of these. Right? Let's turn these into fields. So we'll start with count. Right? All right. So this is of type int, and we need to resolve these. So function and actually no, I have a paginator at this point. So I have my users and for those that need to. All right, so let's type this. Oh, I don't have one. All right. Well, this is a link to our paginator. We'll see how we get to this in just a minute. So I'm not going to count. Something else we can use is total. So total also is an integer. Let's just speed this up a little bit. What's another helper method? Has next page. That is actually Boolean. And that is what has more pages. And we'll do two. Page, which is an int. And page. And last, we have our items. So this is going to be list of type user. And I think it's items. How do we resolve that? Okay, so what do we do? What did we do? We created a new type. This type has these fields on it. It's kind of like a paginator, right? It's got count, total, has next page, current page, and the items inside of it, which is a list of users. So now we need to attach this to our text type. and I guess task users is what we're going to call it. Let's close everything else. Let's go to my schema real quick and add this. So task users is what we're going to call it. This is under the engineers, task users. Okay. So how do we resolve this? All right, so we need a little bit more data than this. We need arguments, right? So args, sorry, set of arguments. And we want, what do we want? We want to count, right? We want to know how many we need to grab. So the type for count is type. What else is the pagination? Pagination is the page. Type, and that's also an integer. Okay, but actually this can kind of, I'll take a little bit track here, so I'm going to say type non-null. I think is how we do this. So what this is saying is like, okay, these are some arguments on my field. And I'll show that in the query that I'm submit. These are the arguments that I need to build out this or to set up the pagination for users. Now I have to have a type or have to have a count, right? So I'm saying like non-null. That's saying like hey, you have to give me a count, and it's a type integer. And then we have a page. This is optional, so we'll set it up down here. It'll default page 1, but it also will be an integer. All right, so that's what this is for. This array of arguments. So I can say, well, say count equals args. We know that we have this, so I'll just say count, and then page is going to be this args. You know what? I got PHP 7. I haven't done this in a slide, so So I think it's args page. And this is just another way of saying page. If it is, get it. If not, right? I just want to try this out myself. All right, so we have the count, we have the page, and so users paginate, and this is the count. I should have set up an ID before. So where paginator. Actually, this doesn't help. Oh, you know what? Push vendor, sorry. Lighthouse, source, support, trait, and I'm looking for my relay connection trait that does this for me. Okay. So I'm going to copy and paste this and explain it. Okay, so the paginator, it looks for a page, query or whatever, argument in the request, right? So we don't have a typical request. So instead, what we're going to say, we're going to pass this in manually. This is kind of, I think this is how it works. So it's paginate, and give me the first count. These are the columns I want to select on it, so it's all. This is the name of the argument, which is page, which actually technically I guess that can be anything since we're doing this manually. And then we want the page number. So what we're saying here is like, okay, give me a total of how many ever count is, and this is going to be the page, and we'll go through this in the query. And I think that's it. Let's see. Let's refresh this. All right, so users. There we go. Count. Let's just get the first two. And I could say, page 1. But at least right now. All right, so this is going to resolve to my task user, which I should have closed. All right, so it's going to resolve to this type. So what fields do we have? We have count, total, has next page, so on and so forth. So we have count, total, has next page, rest of current page, items, and items is going to be an array of users. So we have email and name of user. Did it blow up on me? I think it did. What do I do? Task users, paginate. I noticed one before because I just had it to oh, I'm not passing. That's yeah. So nope. This is my task type. I am not passing a list of task users. There we go. Okay. All right. So now we have, all right, so this got a count of 2. This is Laravel, like the word paginator. This is what it gives us. But I have a total of 3, so it does have a next page. The current page that I'm on is page number 1. And here are the items for that, which is the users, right? So now, if I wanted to paginate through it, I could say, hey, give me page 2. So this has 3 total, so I should only have 1. There we go. So I only get 1 back. This task has a total of 3 users. It does not have a next page. The current page I'm on is 2, and here's the 1 user that I have. And here's the rest of them. All right. Let me just show this to you real quick too. So this is the relay connection, and how you paginate through that is first is just like what we had set up for count, and then instead of page number 2, you're saying after a certain cursor, and I did not ask for the cursor, so let me get that real quick. All right. So again, this is kind of like a helper. Provided by Lighthouse to be relay compliant. So each node has a cursor assigned to it, so it knows where we are. And behind the scenes, really, honestly, all it's doing is just what we built out here. It's literally almost exactly the same thing. It does a base 64 encode, and it gives it, I think, it gives it an oblique name, and then it says where we are in the list. So I could say, actually, I got V2, this is my second one, so I'm going to say after this. That's going to give me the next 2 after, or the next 2 jobs after the 2 that I just went through. And that's it. So yeah, that's the walkthrough. I hope you guys find it useful. It probably went way over on time than I wanted to, and if you guys want to see a more in-depth tutorial where I go through maybe explaining what GraphQL is, what these types are. I didn't even go through mutations, which is how you manipulate data, right? It's kind of like a post request or put request compared to REST. So yeah, if you guys are interested, let me know, and I'll try to do a series. Again, I have a lot of respect for the open source community. This stuff is pretty time consuming, but if you have questions, just add an issue, even if it's just a question, I don't care. If you have a question, just list it here. I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks.